The boat came pretty early on in that idea, and I think, as you said, it was a follow-up to a book that had been pretty successful. Like, I think In a Dark Dark Wood certainly did a lot better than I had expected. I can't speak to anybody else, but it I was writing the follow-up, and it was getting on the New York Times bestseller list, and Reese Witherspoon was like calling my agent and picking it up for film and stuff. And it should have been it was the most wonderful experience, but it made it very, very difficult to write. You're always worried about sort of second book syndrome. And there's so many books that everybody loves the first one, and then they're a bit kind of meh about the second one. And I think I just put a huge amount of pressure on myself to prove that I could write another book that was even more suspenseful, and even more claustrophobic, and had even more sort of interesting characters. And I literally threw everything at that book. There's sort of, the poor main character doesn't get a moment to breathe. There's like something happening on every single page. And I think that was a large part of it, because I was feeling under pressure to prove that I could pull it off again. But also, as the first book was coming out, I was getting these comparisons to Agatha Christie, which wasn't, although I'm a huge Christie fan, it wasn't something that had occurred to me as I was writing the book. I think, if you'd asked me what my influences were when I was writing, I think I would have said much more sort of horror movies and stuff like that. But the first person who made the comparison was my agent when I handed it in, and she said, "Oh, it's very like a modern Agatha Christie." And I think I sort of did a slight double take and was like, "I'm sorry, I don't see that," because my characters are very unlike Christie, the setting is very unlike Christie. But actually, the more I thought about it, the more I could see what she was saying, which is the kind of the structure of the mystery and the way it's revealed is pretty Christie-ish, as is the sort of the locked room conceit. And of course, when it came out, reviewers started making the same comparisons. And then with The Woman in Cabin 10, I really had the choice to pull away from that comparison or lean into it. And I think by that time, I'd sort of come to a realization about what an influence Christie had been on me, and on my sort of my concept of what a perfect crime novel looks like in terms of structure and reveal and so on. And so I chose to lean into it very deliberately. And the thing that Christie does so well is that sort of sense of kind of stifled luxury. You've got settings like Death on the Nile, where they're on a dahabeah on the Nile, or Murder on the Orient Express, where they're on this kind of super luxe train, and then there were None, where they're in this kind of exclusive private island. And then of course she turns it into a complete nightmare, because a prison that you can't escape from is still a prison, even if it's a super luxe one. So I decided that I wanted to lean into that comparison, to write a book with a similar feel. And so that was, the decision to set it on a cruise was very much the kind of going the Christie route of a super luxurious gilded prison. And in fact, the name of the main character, Low Blacklock, is a tip to Christie. There's a Christie character called Blacklock. So that was a thank you to her. I'm not claustrophobic in the sense of like I can get in a lift, that's fine, it doesn't bother me. But I think being in situations that I can't get away from is something I find really stressful, particularly socially. If I'm at a party, the person who's giving me my lift has disappeared upstairs, I don't know when I'm going to be able to leave, I don't know anyone here. That's pretty much my kind of, other people have anxiety dreams about turning up for school without having done revision for their exams, or with no clothes on or whatever. That doesn't bother me. But the idea of being like trapped at a party when I don't know where I'm going to be able to leave, that is my personal nightmare. And that's basically Lo's extended situation in that book, is that she's on she's in a situation where she has to perform, because she's a press officer, well, she's a journalist on a press cruise, so she's out to impress. She wants to try and get this assignment done, she wants to get promoted when she gets back, so she has to do a really good job. She can't get away, because obviously the ship isn't going to dock anywhere, and she's suffering more and more from anxiety. She's had this horrible break-in at the beginning of the book, so she's already in a state of kind of heightened anxiety about everything, so she's not sleeping, and she's, you know, maybe drinking a little bit too much, as some of us do when we're under pressure. So I can't really pull apart how I go about creating that atmosphere, because it's just, I guess it's just about sort of getting all my own kind of horrors and phobias and fears out on the page, in a way that conveys it to the reader as descriptively and effectively as possible.